I want to welcome you to this evening's webinar on multisensory cueing. This, I think, is a really important handful of information, stuff to work with for people across the board. Especially if you're a Tai Chi Fit instructor, I think it sits squarely as the one of the first webinars that you should be taking after your basic training. So Matthew, you're in a perfect spot. It's great stuff for you to be working on, because when we take a look at like how Tai Chi Fit came together as a methodology, it was, and I've told the story here and there, 40 years of experimentation, like having a sense of the times when classes worked really well and people got into that deep state. And in those days, I didn't really have a name for it. It was just like, oh, that was really good Tai Chi. That was really good. Something I knew that was working on some level, but not fully understanding yet what that was. And so trying to put together pieces that worked, and much like any other artist or musician or comedian, sort of an iterative process. And largely, what that means is that for the most of the time I was getting it wrong, or having pieces that were working and other pieces were not working. To sum all that all up, now we have a cueing method which involves 5 important pieces, because I had tried each of these pieces individually and they worked only partially. And it wasn't until it came upon the recipe where all 5 are together in the same cueing combination that it really works. And of all those 5 pieces, the most critical one, the most effective one, is what we're now calling multisensory cueing. I used to call it visualization or visual cueing, and then we called it sensual cueing, because we're trying to expand this out. And then Judy and I were chatting recently, and she says, even the word sensual doesn't quite explain it to everyone. So, but it's really trying to get at all of the senses. So it's not just sight as a sense, but sound, taste, if you can evoke those kinds of senses, and feelings, emotions, and personal sensations that you get in an experience, and evoking those in your cueing, and nonverbal, or at least non-literal kinds of cueing. These are all very important. And without them, you don't quite, you sort of plateau out. You don't get into the depths of flow that we're searching for. And the criteria for what that means, the depth of the flow that I'm looking for, is when we start to get into rhythmic entrainment. That is the benchmark for, okay, we've done it. We've really gotten past sort of the surface level of flow, and really now we're sunk into a deep experience. Things are coming out of me and my participants, and we're connecting together. So when you get into that rhythmic entrainment, you say, now we've done it. That's the real job of the Tai Chi Fit instructor. It's also the goal of any individual who's trying to practice their Tai Chi by themselves, in their own experience of it, to get into that deep rhythmic flow state. Because you don't have to be entrained only to other people. In fact, the original entrainment that we talk about is entraining with nature, right? So when you go outside and you're doing your Tai Chi under the trees, when you know that you've really got into that deep flow state, there's this entrainment between you and the tree, and its flow. Or if you're next to water and there's water flowing by, that entrainment with the rhythm of that water. Right? That's the benchmark we're looking for. Right? So that is the most impactful part. And part of the reason, like we're going to talk about, why this is so a little bit. And this is not scientific entirely, but is a fairly educated guess, is that it gets us out of our left brain. And the left brain is quite literal and linear, and is the part of the brain which is typically preoccupied by our worry and our anxiety. And part of the goal of getting into a moving meditation is to get out of that state. And so things which will shift our awareness out of all this left brain kind of activity and into right brain will really get us, past all of the barriers to that deep flow, right? One of the things that we do in the cueing method is to try to bypass what we call the self-consciousness. All the people which is why we have the dictum, I don't care. I don't care. I don't care what it looks like. I don't care what it sounds like. I don't care if you're doing the same thing. I don't care. Like I'm going to try to hypnotize you into doing it with me, but if you don't, fine with me. And because that is a message of like get out of your head. Doesn't matter. That's not important. So everything that we do, everything that we say, everything that we, gesture and all of it together has this goal of driving right to getting people out of their left brain activity, getting into no brain, getting into at least right brain, right? And the way we do that is to avoid, or not avoid, but minimize things which are literal and mechanical, because that's all right brain function or left brain function. So when we say, the arms float up to about shoulder height, then the elbow bends so that the hand comes past the chin and push forward directly in the line towards me. That's all very literal and very mechanical. And that's all left brain. But when I say, I dip my hands into a pool of water and I can feel every cold drop dripping off of every finger, drop, drop, drop. As it gets closer to me, I can feel the coolness of my skin next to my cheek. That's now, at least the first few times you say it, that's now right brain, non-linear, non-mechanical. Does that make sense? Mm. So that's a little context. Not everyone, but a vast majority of people, for either naturally or just by conditioning, are not good at coming up with these kinds of multisensory scripts right just out of their mouth on the fly. Right? It's a struggle. And so what happens is in the middle of a class or in the middle of your own practice, we default to the mechanical because it's easier. Right? And then, before you know it, you've taught an entire class and all you've said was, okay, bend this elbow, push towards me, take 2 steps to the left, and you're accurate. You're being very clear, as much as I'm going to assume that as much as possible, but you haven't bypassed the left brain. In fact, what you've done is reinforce it. So this is another important point to remember. And Matthew, this is maybe the first time you've heard this from me. The absolute rock bottom, the bedrock of the methodology is this observation. We get best at what we practice most, and we get worst at what we practice least. Right? And so as we rehearse left brain thinking, we get really, really good at it. So much so that, and as we don't practice, right brain thinking, we get terrible at it. So then you come along in a classroom, and my intention in the classroom is to get everybody in this lovely meditative state, and yet I'm actually reinforcing left brain thinking, so I'm doing the opposite of what my intention is. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed.
So the purpose of tonight's workshop is to give us, through a couple of different exercises, an opportunity to develop some multisensory cueing scripts that you can then use, and to give you an opportunity to give you some tools to use so that you can go on and make some of your own scripts as you go. That makes sense? And you can make those scripts for your classes, for your students if you're teaching, but you can also make them for yourself as you're practicing on your own. And Sharon, when you're in your traditional classes, it's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. Consider that this was the purpose of all the wackadoodle names of all the movements. Right?
No, but you're absolutely right. They get hung up on the mechanical, and there's no balance.
There's no balance. It's not that the mechanical is irrelevant. It is just that it's not effective in getting into a flow state. So Matthew, one of the, again, because I'm delighted to be able to say this again because you're new. So in practicing Tai Chi for so long, there is something that's weirdly missing in I'm going to say most Tai Chi players. Just as I observe them, just as I wander around, you know, everywhere I go in the country and watch people in classes and in parks and online and every place else. And that is that there is a certain continuity of motion and energy. So in Tai Chi, there's not supposed to be any stopping points. Even in Chen style, where it looks like you're coming to this resting position, it's not really a stopping point. It is a gathering that then proceeds. You know, so there's no dead stop. And yet I see it all the time. People are like, single whip, pose. Then next minute, my kids go like this all the time. But first, let me take a selfie. It's like what people have been doing in Tai Chi for decades, or centuries. Anyway.
But I find that when you teach the people compliment the fact that we use the imagery. That's what they love the most. That's what they think is so special. Anyway, in Tai Chi Fit, I don't know about the traditional there because
I mean, good teachers have always done that. Like I said, I was doing it in class. I didn't understand for myself yet how critical that aspect was. I just thought it was kind of a cool thing because I'm like that. I'm expressive. But then I started to notice that when I didn't do that, or when I over-indexed on the mechanics, that we didn't get into such a deep state. In fact, very often when I was like, I could be fucking brilliant in getting every explanation about where the movements are supposed to go, and then at the end of class it's like, yeah, good class. Oh God, I got a headache now. Right? Because because it didn't. It was very instructional, but it didn't get us into that yummy place. Right. So I have some more to say about that, but I wanted to give you some context, and I also wanted to lay the foundation for what we're doing tonight and why we're doing it. So here's what we're going to do, and how long this is going to last, I don't know if we wind up going. I say this, by the way, Matthew, I say this every webinar. We'll probably get done in an hour, and then at like 2 hours, we're like, okay, I run out of time. So I'm prepared either way. What we're going to start doing, we're going to take it easy on ourselves and start one by one. We'll see how far we get with the 5 basic combinations that we do in the basic repertoire. So we don't have to try to tackle everything. We'll tackle some stuff that we already know and are pretty familiar with. And we're going to do 3 basic exercises. The first exercise is on using words that come from this one document that I've sent to you called The Vocabulary of Sensation, right? And these sensations are visual, some of them are tactile. I'll just pick some at random here. Some of them are also sort of internal, cold, right? Stretchy, frozen, shimmering, right? There's a whole bunch of words on here. I've got all the words. Sorry, that was a quote. So we're going to do the first exercise will be to take one of the movements, like, for example, in grasping the bird's tail. And we'll go through some of the motions, the positions and the motions, and we'll say, so what does this evoke? What is this? And we'll, sort of collaborate on what does this look like, sound like, feel like, taste like, all those kinds of things. What, if I go like this, does that bring, oh, that smells like roses. That's the thing. And by the way, it is weird. It is funny because some of the stuff makes zero sense.
Yeah.
It makes zero sense to say this smells like roses, and yet it works. That's the magical part, right? So the first exercise will be on that. Then the second exercise will be on something that is about emotions. And for that I have, where'd it go? So I sent this to you, but this is called the Wheel of Emotions. Now, I found this online, so I did not create this one, and I'm not even sure that I would lay it out quite in this way, because it's assuming some associations between some of these emotional states. But I thought it was very interesting. I thought it was I just haven't looked at it long enough to really make a judgment about it. But it gives us a lot of different kinds of emotions to work with. So again, the second exercise will be to take a look at some of the same movements or parts of different movements and say, so what does this feel like? What emotion, if this is push away, like get away from me, like I'm, there could be all kinds of things. I'm not the boss of what it's supposed to be, right? And again, in fact, it doesn't seem to matter at all if it's a literal fit. The fact that you are making those kinds, that's how you're cueing it. That's what gives it the effectiveness. And then the third exercise we'll do will be on non-verbal or non-literal kinds of cueing. So gestures, counting, facial expressions, sounds. I love sounds, just kind of weird vocalizations. Caca! Whatever you want to come up with. So those will be the three exercises that we do. And again, hopefully we'll come away with not just a couple of words, oh, this could be like opening the door, but rather a script that you can then use as you're cueing these movements. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any questions, thoughts, comments, requests?
The word inadequate, it's written twice in this wheel.
Maybe he was feeling something there. Maybe the first word was inadequate, that he was supposed to write insecure, but he wasn't confident enough to write insecure. I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Anyway, yeah, that'll be fun.
Cool.
That'll be fun.
Anything else? Any other?
I might need some translations for these words. I'm not sure I know the meaning of all of them.
I'm not sure how good my French is, but I'll do my best.
Yeah, really. I'm like, oh my goodness. There's like, it shows how many like.
Well, Matthew's Canadian, right? So I can speak English to Matthew, and then he can translate that into Canadian.
No problem, eh? No.
And sometimes your students have the emotions and you have to redirect them, right? They'll come in like inadequate or afraid, and you have to sense that and transform it.
Mm-hmm.
No?
He says no.
No.
No?
No.
Change it?
No. No. And now, now that I've like slammed that door, let me
I love it.
let me explain. So
Yeah.
those kinds of things are always done internally, right?
Mhm.
So a change of emotional state is not something that I can make happen. I can't transform it for someone else. I can't. In fact, I don't even know whether it's appropriate at the time, right? It could be like the most important thing that this person ever does is be swimming in the midst of this emotion, maybe for the first time in their life, and then something will break through with it. I don't know, right? I think that there is always, I mean, it is our function as instructors when we're standing in the front of the class to be attuned to safety things. So if somebody looks like they're having a meltdown, we do something about that. And that's happened to me in class lots, right? But the idea that that people are going to come into my class and they're like, I'm going to be the one to like get them all calmed down. Like, no. What I do, however, is create an environment, create a situation that is designed, that I know from experience, that I've spent 40 years crafting, that as we get people into, so here's the thing, and again, Matthew, this is great information for you. The solution to all of these kinds of problems, you see somebody who's like, their body's all twisted. You say, I go, oh, God, I want to get them to stand up straight. Don't tell them to stand up straight. You get somebody who's like, oh, I can just tell they're angry from work or they've got something on their mind. It's like, don't try to get them to calm down, right? Focus on flow, because flow will solve all those issues. The flow itself will get people to release their tensions. The flow itself will get people out of their head, right? So if you want to do something, focus on getting in the flow state, and then they either be with you or they won't.
So don't try to redirect.
No. And it's
You end up putting somebody back up in their head immediately when you highlight it, and next thing you know, that's it. It's like, it's game over.
Precisely. This is why our method of doing safety cues does not include pointing out the danger. Right? The way we do safety cueing, is like, oh, don't bend your knees like that. Oh, get down. Don't stand. Or like, hey, you just do it your own pace. Or you find your own level, and that's right. I get tricky. I tell people, like, I don't know how low you should squat. I don't care. But as long as you're still smiling, right? Because there's something in there that then people can, oh, I'm not smiling. Okay, maybe I better. So they monitor themselves. But as Matthew points out, the moment that you highlight it, suddenly it gets worse instead of getting better.
It becomes a judgment, right? And we already judge ourselves enough, and that's how we're going to interpret anything anyways. So right away they're going to be thinking, why did he tell me to adjust? What else am I doing wrong?
Right.
And
Oh, yes, exactly.
He's so relaxing.
Or, those of you who've done fitness, stuff, so you tell people to say, so if you're a beginner or if you don't feel strong enough, then I want you to do it at this level. And everybody in their minds are like, I'm not going to be that guy. No. I'm going to tough it out.
Well, that's true, but we always say that. As a fitness instructor, we always say that.
Yes. That's the worst possible thing that you could say. It will always have the opposite effect.
Yeah, I've noticed that. It's true.
Yeah. So we get tricky. And so again, flow solves those issues, right? And here's why flow solves those issues. Because the issues are a compensation pattern. Whether it's a physical compensation pattern, compensation pattern is a deviation from neutral that based on some condition that people are either consciously or unconsciously trying to escape from. So they are escaping from a pain moment or from a weakness, or they get best at what they practice most, so they're habituated to non-neutral alignment, right? Flow, on the other hand, is a return to a more neutral posture. When you get into flow, your body just sort of naturally I release all of those compensations. And the same thing is, you know, in cognitive compensations and emotional compensations that are going on is like why are people all stressed out in their head? It is a compensation away from, you know, a pain moment or, you know, a habituation of some kind, and it's the resistance that makes them all stressed out. You get people back into a neutral head, and it corrects itself.
So you just ignore it? Like people come in frustrated.
Right.
Like I've had that. People come in frustrated to class for, you know, X, Y, Z, whatever reason.
It's a real,
Address.
yeah, that's a great question. And I need to be really like clear in what way. So there is a sort of an outward attitude that is the Taiji Fit way, and then there is what you're paying attention to. So you're paying attention to a lot of things. If somebody is frustrated, I don't want you to just be blind to it and not be aware of it. If you're aware of it, then because we're constantly manipulating our own cueing in order to sort of lead the class in that way. And so if I'm not paying any attention to somebody's frustration and they're not in flow, then I may miss an opportunity to adjust my own cueing in that way. As an outward attitude towards your participants, yes, ignore it. Like pretend it doesn't happen. You're frustrated, you're pissed off, you're happy-go-lucky, you're high. It's all one to me. I'm just happy you're here. Stand right here and breathe. Right? Because I've got a methodology. I have a plan. So guys, some of you know this because I've said this before. When I'm in class, like people who don't know me are like, who's this wackadoodle? This guy is like random as heck. You know, he's like, what's coming out of his mouth? Right? And I work very hard at appearing that random. Actually, I don't work that hard. It's pretty natural to me.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But here's the thing. There is a reason for everything that I do in the class. There's a reason for every joke, for every different vocalization, for every bit of music I play. There's a reason for everything.
But that's a lot of psychology in there.
Maybe, but it's basic. So here's what I'm trying to do. So I spent 40 years trying to develop this psychology, working on that. And now I'm giving you the benefit of that so that you don't have to like get a master's degree in psychology to be able to use it. I'm giving you the tools to use it in our curriculum. Right? Just because, you know, and then again, also, I always say, like, don't take my word for anything. Like, even though I could be as confident as heck, but, you know, don't take my word for it. But now you have all been in a flow situation with me, and you have experienced for yourself that it works. And that's all you need to know is like, yes, this is working, and these are the components of how it works. And tonight, what we're doing with multisensory cueing is a very, very important component of that, right? A lot of times I don't come up with scripts in my head. I blank out or I haven't prepared or something like that, and which is why we're doing non-verbal, non-literal cueing, because that's always available, right? If you can't think of what to say, just go zoom. And then if you do it at the right moment, it works. Right? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What else? Other questions or?
I was just thinking along the lines. I mean, it really helps that you're clearly a very good storyteller, and that is something that I've always tried to bring into my teaching. Is I always try to bring life stories and make that a part of the lesson, because invariably I'll see somebody maybe going through a situation that I may have went through, and I try to tell it even as a third person story or whatnot. And I find that that's kind of your gift is you're able to use your narrative to create these images. Because this morning was, I think, one of the first mornings I actually got that flow state. There were just certain things that you were saying, and I started just to allow myself to focus on your words, and I didn't really give a shit about what I was doing anymore. And today I went in for my blood pressure. my doctor says he hasn't seen it this low in a couple of years, and they're thinking about taking me off the blood pressure medication. My blood pressure was like, I don't know, it was below normal, so whatever. But I was really, and I was going through a lot of stuff, but I just allowed myself to experience it and really listen, and even like the sounds and little nuances and whatnot, even the silence in between what you did allowed for space for me to kind of really, because some people talk too much, like I'm doing right now, and you can't really experience. You don't have enough time for a mental gap to really allow yourself to be mindful and to be present in that moment. And if somebody automatically interrupts that moment, then again, you've screwed with that flow state, So yeah, this is mind-blowing for me.
That's part of the observation that we're constantly doing. The observation and assessment is like knowing when to talk and knowing when to shut up. Right. And I teach, the nature of the classes that you see me teaching online very often are a very mixed group, and I always teach to the lowest common denominator. So I'm always imagining my mother-in-law in the back row of the class, right? Because she's tried a couple of classes, she goes, I don't get it. So I'm always teaching, like my cueing is always for the woman in the back row. I don't get it. But a group that comes in, like Sharon's been in the Sunday morning class before, when we, like, I just will say like 3 words, and we all get into this really deep, flowing state because they've all been there before. And again, here's the benchmark. This is what you're looking for. What you're keeping attuned for is rhythmic entrainment. That moment when all of a sudden everybody is at that same, like 5 bodies, 1 brain kind of thing. It has to be my brain.
But it's your randomness. I know it's not random what you're doing, but it's random for us that keeps our attention involved. So we're not in the rut.
Yeah.
We're not.
So you have many tools at your disposal to because there's a version of that sort of motion that looks like it's all connected and continuous, which is actually just sort of, now I've zombied out, right? And so we're also attuned to like true flow versus pseudo flow. Right? And here's the thing, like, I don't have to be too technical about it. You guys already know. You can feel it. It's like, it's just, there's not a whole lot of vibration in what we're doing right now. So we need to do something. Right? So, great. All right, so what I'm going to do is let's all grab or have available to us this sheet called The Vocabulary of Sensation. And you can, let me invite you to stand up with me if you like. You don't have to this evening. You can certainly sit. It might help to get up and move around as we do this. I'm going to switch cameras so that I can get up into the studio, and we'll start going through some of the movements that we know together. There you are. Okay. I swear it looks like the ceiling's lower since I've been back. Maybe I need to just adjust the camera slightly. Maybe that's a little bit better. All right. So let's take something simple to start with. Let's do play the peepaw. Right? So play the peepaw, I usually begin in this fashion here. Right? So this motion is where I start, and then the first build is here. Okay? So let's just stop right there. And let's take a look at this vocabulary sheet, because what we're looking for is, what does this look, sound, feel, smell like? And if you take a look at some of these. So my eyes just immediately went to the word dizzy.
Yeah.
Right? Because remember, it doesn't have to be logical. I mean, it may not work. You may not be able to pull it off, but pulsing. Here's a word, pulsing. How do you like that one? So what do you think? I'm going to let you guys pull some words out here.
Mushy.
Mushy. Okay.
Like walking on swampy ground.
Ooh, I like it. There we see. Now we're. This is what I'm talking about. I'm walking on swampy ground. Is swampy in here too? That would be a good one. I have sweaty.
Sweaty ground. You.
Sweaty. I'm getting sweaty walking through the swampy ground. I mean, that's a story.
Mm-hmm.
You get it? I'm getting all sweaty, in the humidity of the swamp, squish, squish, walking through swampy ground. And then I've got to push the lianas out of the way.
But you're also being careful.
What's that?
You're also being very careful.
Yeah.
Careful.
You don't know what's underneath you.
Good. So but here's the thing. What is it that's underneath you?
Scorpions.
Scorpions.
Broken glass.
Works for, yeah. So because here's the thing. So I want you just to listen to these two side by side. I'm walking carefully. I'm being careful when I walk. I'm stepping on broken glass. Which one is a stronger, sensation?
Mm.
One is tell me, one is show me.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I like the broken glass. I like the scorpions, actually. But, squishy ground. So don't just tell me it's squishy ground. It's, swamp ground, swamp grass. It's quicksand.
Quicksand. He'll be swallowed by the quicksand.
That's right. It's quicksand.
Yeah, I can just see that. Oh, you're going to turn into a zombie pretty soon with this story.
Yeah, well, there you go. So, but this is what we're looking for. And the reason why we're doing this as an exercise to try to develop a script is so that next time you're teaching this movement, you've got it all written down already. It's already there. You've got a complete sentence. You've got a complete story, more than just a couple of words.
Make it what you want, because it could be that, there's eggs and you don't want to squish the egg. It could be very soft.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. Oh, I walked into the grocery store and an entire case of eggs has fallen to the ground, and I'm trying to step to the bread aisle without getting egg all over my feet. Yes, I'll have a packet of bacon. Thank you so much. Oh, hash browns. Thank you. You take the bacon and the hash browns.
A little bit of coffee with that.
Yes, and some coffee with the. Thank you. There we go.
Oh, footlong. Yes.
There we go. Now you're talking. That's what we want to do with the imagery. So let's write that down. Right? Let's write that down. I get you guys a chance to come back in for a moment.
I thought I was the only weirdo.
What's that?
I said I thought I was the only weirdo. My students always look at me like I'm some sort of lunatic. Like, what are you talking about?
You're in good company, my man.
I know. It's like it's mind blowing right now. You're talking my language.
Yeah.
So I've got walking through the market. The eggs have fallen to the floor. Trying not to step on them. And then bacon, ... hash browns, ... coffee, or giant cup of coffee,
Yeah.
another giant cup of coffee.
Yeah. And then you look at them and you say, oh, maybe some of you need the giant cup of coffee this morning.
Yes. Now you're thinking. All right, there we go.
Walk into the kitchen, right?
No, when I used to teach it, it was you've done so well. You grab a glass of wine, you sit back on your stool, and then you grab another glass.
Ah, there you go.
And then
And then you
bagels for
settle.
everyone. Everyone, you get a bagel. You get a bagel. Everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're drinking wine that early in the morning, that's fine by me.
Our classes are at night. Now, come on.
Good. All right, so let's stay with it. All right, let's take on another part of this movement. So, typically, what I'll do with Play Pipa is I will add this portion here. Now, here's the thing that I also wanted to point out. A lot of the cues that we're already very comfortable and familiar with, like, embracing the moon and tossing the moon across, or toss the ball, toss the frisbee, whatever. What happens is that the first few times that your participants hear it, it becomes right brain. Oh, an image. Oh, it's something like that. After the 14th time they've heard it, now it is left brain. It's no longer some, disrupting the logical. It now becomes the rote. And so you have to refresh your cueing or your imagery or your sensations in some way so that you can keep it from becoming entirely left brain again.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Like the teachers were doing during Christmas holidays. That was fun, because they were serving cookies and hors d'oeuvres, and it was like the Christmas tree, and it was like all related to the holidays or stuff like that. Was fun.
Here's what's interesting about that is how vividly you remember that.
Yeah, because I did the same thing when I was teaching.
Yeah.
I said, well, I'm going to use that.
Right.
And the people really liked it. And I thought, they said, oh, that is so much fun. How do you say that? And I'm like, yeah, I'm just copying, but that's okay.
Excellent.
But it's true. It didn't come from me, but I thought it was such a good idea.
So what kind of, again, let's not try to figure this out in our own heads. Let's go to the sheet here and think about sensations here.
Sensation. I don't know. It's openness. I don't know. I can't look at words, but fluttery.
Fluttery, okay.
I don't know if it's in there.
Actually, I think flutter is in there, yes.
And expanding.
Expanding.
Yeah.
What about stringy?
Stringy. Yeah, there's
Here.
no wrong answer in
Part
here.
dough and making long life noodles.
Ooh.
I I just had some the other night, and that's kind of the movement. he was doing.
Oh, noodles. Yeah, that's true. Pasta. When you make the pasta with the machine there.
Well, also in China, when they make these, they roll out the dough and then they take their fingers in it and they pull it apart.
Yeah.
Yes. You're supposed
Okay,
to
so
eat those
like
on your
stretchy
birthday.
dough.
Stretching's good. Yeah.
Yeah, stretchy, like a stretchy dough is good.
Stretchy dough, but also saltwater taffy. You could be doing
Oh,
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've moved from the breakfast aisle into the saltwater taffy aisle. And stretching. And my machine gun. Stretching.
Saltwater
Right.
taffy.
Now, so those are some good sort of visual images. What other senses? Again, don't tell me. You say, "Oh, this is stretchy." That tells me, show me, right? It's beginning to melt in my hands. I can feel the sugar on my palms sticking to the taffy is sticking to me because of all that sugar in there, and I just roll it on back. It's starting to like drip off of my hands. It's so
Yeah, it's getting
stretchy.
sticky.
It's getting sticky, right?
Yeah.
You could begin to smell the chocolate as your hand.
Yes. Now, getting to smell the chocolate. Like, so Matthew, tell me about a great day of chocolate for you.
That doesn't include heartburn? Sure. I would say it's Easter, and I love the solid chocolate bunnies, not the expensive ones, but the cheap ones.
Oh.
And I could gnaw on one of those all day, and it's not just the taste, it's the texture, it's the smell, the aroma I get, because it's like that milk chocolate, and there's just something about it. Maybe it's the cheapness of the chocolate. I don't know what it is. But it brings me back,
I can
to my
smell
childhood.
it right now. I can smell that cheap milk chocolate. So that's the script.
Mm.
You get this?
Smell that cheap milk chocolate.
Cheap milk chocolate.
It's like
You start to say, you know
wax.
that.
It's the wax in there.
But there are certain smells that, when you're walking by a See's candy store and somebody opens the door and it hits you like, a wave of sugar in the air. It's like, oh, that's that cheap milk chocolate. Yes. And I'm just rolling it out.
I'll choose the expensive chocolaterie.
Oh, okay.
I'll have that one, the dark chocolate.
Yes, she's much too sophisticated for us, Matthew.
Oh, no. That's all I have. And I have it almost every day. One little piece, dark chocolate.
But see, that was a story, Matthew,
Yeah.
right? That was perfect. And you're a great storyteller. You are. And
I love telling stories.
So
Love it.
that's what you want to employ in this kind of cueing, right? So let's write that down. Whether it's the saltwater taffy or the melting chocolate.
My cheap $1.99 chocolate bunny.
Oh, it'll make some people laugh with that, that's for sure.
And no, I can't even have chocolate without suffering for 3 or 4 days.
Oh, are you serious? You should have good chocolate.
I was going to go to, there's a doctor here that treats people for that with like real true chocolate. So I'm thinking I might try it
I
out.
think Godiva chocolates, because they're all made with liquor, and then you just don't notice it.
You just don't care.
You don't care.
No, you have to stick to the dark one, not the stuff with all bunch of stuff in it. No.
All right, so we're writing down, right? So
All
we
right.
have for Play Pipa, we've got Walking Through the Market, and then for Taming the Wild Mane. We have stretching the saltwater taffy. You know, and what you want to do is start to go to town with this story. You know, like you get really expressive. The smell was great. You smell, you know, the chocolate in there, but also that's what I was trying to do with talking about the stickiness on your skin of the, you know, the sugar as it's melting, as it's getting, you know, more stringy, which I love the word that's, you know, stringy. That's a good yummy word right there.
Can DDR, can you even play off of the name of the move
Oh,
when you're
absolutely.
saying parting wild horse's mane, or can you describe the mane and draw it out that way?
Yes. So this is, you know, what we're doing right now with these images and these stories. Again, it's not so avant-garde. It actually is the intention of the oldest part of the traditional aspect of Tai Chi. So we're looking at the names of the movement. Chinese language is a contextual language. So it's very it's a very, you know, right brain language in itself. It's a non-linear language. And the names of these movements were chosen to evoke a story, to a picture. So Yema Fen Zheng, which is the Chinese for parting the wild. You know, I'm so used to saying it. It's not parting the wild horse's mane, like, you know, create a part. The word literally to divide, right? Fen means to divide, but Zheng is, you know, Ma is the horse, so it's something about the horse. Fen to divide, and then Zheng is tangled hair, messy hair.
Right.
And so and so we roughly translate that into English as parting the wild horse's mane. But it doesn't really say specifically the mane. It says the hair on the horse, which is wild, messy. So it's not the wild horse.
Mm-hmm.
It's the wild hair. Right? And so that's a great story. Like I'm getting into that tangled, you know, like it's, what kind of horses did they have in China? They were Mongolian steppe ponies. All this thick, you know, with grease in their hair and, you know, all this kind of stuff from being ridden by a Mongolian for the last, as he was riding to battle, eating a pig's knuckle while he's riding and wiping it on the knee.
Very barbarian.
He's a barbarian, that's right. And his entire world's possessions on his back, jangling on the sides of the horse as he's running down the, right.
Yeah, it's much more fun with the story behind.
So you know, so that's that. So Sharon, the answer is yes.
The answer is always yes.
That's always,
Except for the one I asked.
I can never get there so quickly. I have to. You know.
With David Dorian, it's yes or I don't care.
No, he shot me down already once. It's okay.
Yeah. No, you know, that was, and Sharon, the question you asked is a really good question, and just to be really like clear about that. Oh my God, how many years did I try to get people to calm down or to, you know, be in a better mood or to try to, you know, manage their emotional state in some way because I felt like I could or I should or whatever. Like, yeah, I've totally done that. And then it's like putting lipstick on a pig. It wastes perfectly good cosmetics and it just pisses the pig off,
nice,
you know.
Putting lipstick on a pig.
No, I absolutely see your point. Absolutely. So, yeah.
All right. So let's pick another. Let's do one more of these. And by the way, again, just to remind you that we're doing this as an exercise in this way because this is, if it rolled out of our heads and out of our mouths really easily, we wouldn't need to do this. But we're going through this exercise because you want to walk away with some scripts and then have those scripts be the seed for other scripts that you will proceed to write for other movements. Does that make sense? All right, let's start the other way. Let's just look at a word or two or three on the vocabulary and then see if we can match a movement to it.